Brewing Network.
Hey everybody, how you doing out there? Oh, that's a good first hello. Welcome to the Brewers Studio behind the Brewers. My name is Justin Crosley with the Brewing Network, and I am lucky enough to be friends with Matt, so they hire me every year. And even if I do a shitty job, Matt says hire him again. So, thank you, Matt. Welcome. I'm so glad you're here hanging out with us. We're going to put beer in your glass, so you get to just hang out and chill in the shade, most of you anyway, and enjoy our fantastic panel that we have for you, which is about the evolution of the IPA, which is kind of a crowd pleaser, right? I feel like it's like the band, you have to play the hits, and we're playing the hits. We got to talk about IPA. And the panel that we have here, this is the free bird of Firestone Walker panels. And it's going to go on that long, too. But we have actually a group of people who can talk about literally the beginning of American craft beer IPAs, all the way up to what we're drinking now, what you know and love. So I'm really excited to get to talk about it. I've recently fallen back in love with the IPA. I've been doing this for a long time, and I fell out of love with it. I switched over to lagers and pale ales, but recently I'm full in on the IPAs. So I'm happy to talk about how they've come so far, and they drew me back, and they keep drawing other people back to them. So please welcome Matt Brynildson from a brewery you might know, Firestone Walker. Yeah. The festival is otherwise known as Matt Brynildson's Festival. That's what I like to call it. Yeah. If you're a brewer and you're here, it's because Matt thinks you're cool. If you're not here, he probably thinks you're cool. He just doesn't have time for you. Next up is Vinnie Cilurzo from Russian River Brewing Company. Yeah. He's made an IPA or two in his life that we're going to get to talk about. Next to Vinnie is Enzo Frauenschuh, who is from Fraugruber Brewery from Germany. I couldn't do an IPA panel without having, if we're going to talk about the evolution, we have to have an international presence, because I feel like the evolution is not the same around the world as it is in the U.S., so we had to get like a different perspective. Also, Enzo just makes really good beer, so he's here. Enzo's so popular, by the way, I'm just going to preface you now. When we pour his beer, we only have a little bit for everybody. So don't get mad at my wonderful volunteers. They just have a little bit. His beer ran out already. He's that popular. And then finally, we have my friend Kelsey McNair from North Park Beer Company. Yeah. And I'm just curious, because this is not to be embarrassing at all, but raise your hand if you've heard of North Park Beer Company. Okay, good. That's what I wanted to make sure of. They're one of the best IPA brewers in the country. So I'm so happy that Kelsey is here on our panel. I'm happy that you guys know him. I'm going to be doing a show with Kelsey in a couple weeks down in San Diego. So follow the Brewing Network. All right. So the evolution of the IPA, and the first beer that should be going into your glass, or maybe already is in your glass, is from Vinnie. Vinnie, tell us about this beer. It might be the first ever double IPA on the planet. Is that what we're thinking, right?
So they say.
I think that's what we're thinking.
Yeah.
The first ever double IPA brewed on the planet that you brewed in Temecula?
Yeah, so Inaugural Ale was my first commercial beer ever brewed on my own. It was done at Blind Pig, my first brewery in Southern California in Temecula. It's now known as the first commercial double IPA in kind of modern brewing era. Yeah. And so when Amy from Firestone reached out asking if I could be on this panel of evolution, I had this opening in our brewery, in our pilot brewery, to brew something, and I just knocked this out. So we brewed this special for this panel.
But it's the recipe from the first.
Yeah, it is. It is the recipe. And so, when you drink this now and you compare it to any number of the IPAs that are here at the fest, it is less hoppy and probably a little bit more pedestrian in a way.
Sure.
But the idea of it is that it's a bit of a time machine. It's to take you back of how IPAs were, a double IPA at that, at 7.25% alcohol, what they were at the time, and the fact that, I think the first thing, if there's like one takeaway that I'm gonna give you guys today, is that this has Cascade, Chinook, Centennial, and Columbus, ETZ in it. But when I started homebrewing, in 1989. I remember, and I was making IPA. I was only making it with Cascade and Chinook. I remember going to the homebrew shop in El Cajon, beer and wine craft, and there'd be Cascade, Chinook, you could Galena and Nugget, and that was it. And,
so fancy.
And so I'm missing 2 of the C hops, Centennial and Columbus. And I remember one time going in, and there was a couple bags of lettered and numbered hops, CFJ 90 and CFJ 4. And CFJ 4 never made it wherever it went to the ether. CFJ 90 eventually became Centennial. But so then when I opened Blind Pig in 94, that was available. Centennial was available, so that became a part of the Blind Pig IPA. But for the inaugural ale, I followed a process from Ballantine where it was a 1-year aged beer. I did it in a stainless tank on oak. And in the middle of that, CTZ came out, or Columbus came out. And so I added it to the dry hop at that point. But there was no designer hops of Amarillo, Simcoe, let alone Citra Mosaic. That I think everyone should, raise a glass to the hop breeders for all that they've done to give us crazy, amazing hops that are so flavorful.
You can do that, yeah. I think that's a good point, and Vinnie mentioned that to me before the panel. So our last panel was about technology. It was about thiolized yeast, and then new hop products came up, of course. But Vinnie was brewing double IPAs, the first double IPA, before there was any fancy shit. And I thought that was a cool way you were like, yeah, hey, this one, though, is hoppy and not fancy. And it's a great beer. Is it still a great IPA? If you ordered it today, and I asked that not just to get applause, too, but, in other words, it holds up today. We still love the basic facets of an IPA, which is some firm bitterness, good hops. They're not fancy new modern hops, but they're good hops. And all of that comes through in a solid IPA. So even the start of the evolution of IPA was, I think, what we still all know and love. And now, though, since I just have you on the microphone, what would you say is your fanciest IPA? All these years later, designer hops, I don't know what. What's your fanciest IPA now?
Probably the 2 beers we're pouring at our booth, DDH Pliny.
Okay,
and
double dry hop Pliny.
Dry hop Pliny, and then R&D IPA 23, which is actually using a technique that I learned from Kelsey, which maybe he can talk about that technique. But I think if we're talking about the evolution of IPA, you have to go all the way back to Ballantine IPA. That's really the original American IPA, but they were using a combination of English and probably some, I think it was Bullion, Brewers Gold. There's probably some cluster in it. And then after that, you have Liberty Ale, which is all Cascade, but Anchor never called that an IPA. Sierra Nevada Celebration. Only recently they started labeling it as an IPA, but all intents and purposes it was an IPA. But it wasn't a West Coast because it had a lot of crystal malt and it's that nice red color. But I do remember a couple months ago, Ken and I were talking, and he told me that before they started brewing commercially in 1980, they were home brewing 5-gallon batches of IPA, but he was using English and German hops, but they thought it was too bold of a flavor. And so they didn't go with IPA as one of their beers at the time. But then from what I consider the first 3 early West Coast IPAs are Rubicon IPA from Rubicon in Sacramento, which is no longer around. Swami's from Pizza Port.
That beer is still being made.
From the original Pizza Port and Solani Beach. But like we've done with our IPAs, it's progressed over the years. And then our Blind Pig IPA and Blind Pig Inaugural from Temecula. Those were the 3 early West Coasters. And maybe where I use Chinook, Vince used Galena in Swami's, but all in that vein of American hops. And there were other IPAs being made at the time, but they were more English style. Sure. There was this amazing beer festival, not quite as amazing as this one, Matt.
This one's pretty good.
In Atascadero, it was a varietal beer festival. Natalie remembers this. And so instead of having booths by brewery, there was booths by style. So you had a lager, a stout, a porter, and all of them had 8 beers, if I remember right, except the IPA. There was only 5 beers at the IPA booth because there just weren't that many made, or at least that Chuck could get for his festival.
Yeah. Matt, thinking of this time period that Vinny's talking about, can you remember your maybe favorite or even just any IPAs of your time that you were like, oh, this is some...
What year was this originally?
94-ish?
So, can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, so it was a couple years later at Goose Island that we started looking at making an IPA. We were so far removed from your brewery, we weren't able to taste those. So it was mostly Liberty and Celebration. And at the time, Celebration was the beer that we had our beat on, and we knew Centennial was in that beer. So we really focused on Centennial being the hop. And then another beer, and I don't know, the time frame's probably a little after what you're talking about, is Bell's Two Hearted. And that came along probably a couple years after what we're talking about, like mid to late 90s. And so being from the Midwest, Bell's Two Hearted was very, very influential.
Still a great.
And 100% Centennial. So we really focused on Centennial being the lead hop in an IPA that we would make. And it was trying to figure out dry hopping, since we knew Sierra was dry hopping, but it was whole leaf. So that was a practice and a process that we weren't going to try to apply. So I'm curious about, was this dry hopped with pellets at the time?
Oh yeah.
Both. Yeah. So Matt asked what we dry hopped this with originally. It was pellets and whole cone. When Natalie and I made this the first time a couple years ago, we did it both ways. This time I did all pellets just because we had some production constraints in the pilot brewery. The other interesting thing about this is that there's oak chips. It's dry hopped with some oak chips, which I did back in the day because it was a part of what I thought was the recipe for Ballantine. Ballantine would age their IPA for a year in oak barrels or foeders, but they were, in hindsight now, they were probably pitched. But I would throw oak chips in and did this year-long dry hop aging with this beer, and so now there's oak chips in here still.
You were such a home brewer in the early days. You're like, oh, let's just put the kitchen sink in this beer. It'll be great. Oak chips, and I feel like you were so experimental back then. You are still now.
Have you seen our neighbors at Garage Project today?
True. They were literally blowing smoke into their beer. Yeah.
I'm surprised the fire marshal's not there.
Yeah. All right, we should, hopefully, maybe we can pour Enzo's beer. And there's not a lot of it, so forgive us, but it's because Enzo's so popular and handsome that his beer just it gets drank up. We don't even get a taste, so you're going to have to tell us about your beer, Enzo, because there's not enough for the panel to have it. We're going to give it all to the audience because we love you. But Enzo, tell us about your beer, and we can take the next step in the evolution of IPA.
Yeah, the idea behind our cold IPA. It's a cold IPA, basically.
It's a cold IPA?
It's a cold IPA, exactly. And at that time, we don't have many cold IPAs in Germany. And so, to us, it's a super new beer style on the one hand. And on the other hand, the batch we brought over here is our second attempt of cold IPA. So, it's quite new to us. And
just quickly, what makes a cold IPA a cold IPA? Just if you can do the quick version.
As far as I know, or in Germany as we know, compared to a traditional India pale lager, it's fermented at a higher temperature. So it's fermented with a bottom fermenting yeast, but usually for an India pale lager, you ferment it at, let's say, 8 to 10 Cs, I don't know, in Fahrenheit. But anyway, and we ferment this one between 16 and 18, which is super unusual in Germany. I mean, if my former boss would know that I ferment the bottom fermenting yeast at that temperature, he would totally freaked out. But anyway,
almost not allowed.
It's allowed, even if you have the beer to it.
Okay.
It's definitely allowed, but it's a super new thing because usually the traditional German brewers are used to ferment it lower because they are not able to deal with the negative aromas which comes along at that temperature. And that's the reason why when you go to school they always say you never do that, you should never do that. So keep it below 12 Cs, otherwise the beer gets shitty and doesn't taste that good. So and I mean, to me it was trying to do a new beer style, try something different. I mean, we basically do up to 70% of our annual production is hazy IPAs.
Really?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, we are not tired of brewing hazy IPAs, but I mean, it's like you don't want to eat pizza every single day. So you want to eat something different. Yeah. And that's the reason why we brewed this beer. And meanwhile, I mean, it's just a second attempt, as said, but to me, it's my personal favorite beer style, new favorite beer style.
Well, and I think this is the perfect topic for the evolution of the IPA, that in Germany, it's your hazy IPA is your most popular style, is what you're saying.
Yeah, or at least that's the style we are known for. We started brewing in January 2017, so we are quite young. And at that time, the general,
did you start straight away with hoppy American style beers, or so not German lagers?
No, we started with we had a core range at that time, which was a Kerman style Keller beer.
Okay, yeah.
With a new modern twist, would I say? Then we had a India Pale Lager. We had an IPA and a double IPA. And that's it at that time.
And that's it. And I'm just, again, curious about the evolution of the IPA. Was it immediately a hit, your IPAs and double IPAs that people
Definitely,
want?
yes.
Yeah.
Definitely, yes.
Where exactly are you located in Germany?
About 50 miles northwest of Munich, so still Bavaria, which is a good and a bad thing at the same time due to the purity law. But I mean, craft beer in general in Germany is super young. It started 2011, 2012, and within the past, let's say 12 years, the Germans try to find new ways. They always look to the American market or to the UK market, what's going on there, and so it happened a lot in a quite short period of time.
So I love this about the evolution of American craft beer, is that originally we were influenced by the Germans and the English and all of Europe. American craft beer wouldn't exist without that influence. We were so heavily influenced. And then we did that like Texas thing that we do, where we're like, oh, well, let's just make it our own. And now we're sort of backwards influencing your beer and what people are drinking over there, especially with IPAs.
Yeah, definitely, yes.
American hops in your beer, or German and European hops in IPAs?
Mostly American, New Zealand and Australian hops. I mean, compared to the US hops, the German flavor varieties are not that intense compared to the American ones, so it's not that interesting to put a Mandarina Bavaria or a Calista or stuff like that into a beer. It's simply too weak, or at least a flavor profile. If you combine it with an American hops, then it works out quite well, but not on its own.
And then can you just describe the beer that the lucky few got to drink, just so we can enjoy?
Yeah, it's the idea behind this beer was making a volume drinking IPA. So it's not that strong. What you get to drink has about 6% ABV. It's dry, but not too dry compared to other IPAs we make. And it's the bitterness which comes along with this beer. It's only made by traditional Bavarian flavor. So not a high alpha hop, so only simple bitterness, a real thirst quencher, crispy. That's what it's made for.
Love it. So Vinnie and I have talked over the years that we love all the new IPAs, but we still always come back to a firm bitterness. If we're going to drink an IPA, we still want not just, so I love a good soft, pillowy, hoppy beer, but if I'm going to drink an IPA, I still want a firm bitterness. And so I think that's what you strive for. I haven't had your beer, Enzo, but you still, we can't just go all flowers. We got to have a little bit of bitter, right?
It's what brings you back to have the drinkability, the thirst quenching component of a IPA is the bitterness in the beer. Even if it's a hazy beer, I want a firm bitterness there.
Still something. All right, well, let's try Kelsey's beer from North Park, which is a collaboration, I think, with Firestone, right? Is that what we have? Tell us about this beer.
Yeah, so when we got the prestigious invitation to participate in this, the best beer festival in the world.
Is this your first year here, Kelsey?
It's amazing, yeah.
Welcome, we're so glad to have you. Yeah, round of applause. Not everybody gets invited. It's a really cool thing.
No, this is awesome. I'm beside myself with joy. This is so good. But no, like coinciding with that invitation, Sam, who is the brewer who runs the program at the Firestone Walker Propagator Brewery, said let's make a North Park style West Coast IPA, and kind of like just gave him top to bottom like our whole process, what we do. And the Propagator is it's a masterpiece of a little brewery. I mean, it's like 10 hectoliter system, and but everything's push button automated. It can do decoction mashes. Like it's just a very amazing brew house for its scale. And so some of the things that we did there were not necessarily typical of what we would do, in my brewery, where we're on a direct fired brew house, with no way to heat the mash tun. So there were step mashes employed and things that just, not typical to our norm that translated into the final results of the beer. And so we were shooting for something that would be a 7.5% West Coast IPA. And I think part of the mash regimen dried out, it broke down some of those sugars. We had a bit more fermentation, a bit more hop creep than we get in my brew house. And we ended up with a 8.1% beer. So
That's a big jump.
Yeah, we were shooting for a single in my book at 7.5, and we ended up at 8.1. We rubbed a lot of hops that day, and the Simcoe that Firestone hand selected is absolutely stunning. I mean, it's just so much tropical fruit. It's beautiful. We paired that up with some Strata, which we've been using a lot of recently. Since that hop, came to market, we've really enjoyed its expression, between very, very like high passion fruit and also this sort of rich, dank cannabis character. And then Nectaron, which is a newer New Zealand variety that we've really liked. It's like pineapple and, just this sort of like nectarine, stone fruit. And so, you get all of those layers. What we do at North Park a lot is we lean into a lot of the advanced hop products that are available. So, cryo hops, these hop pellets that are removing a lot of the vegetal material are really built to be something that is, a way to save costs and cut down your use of product, and we've thought of that as more of a can we just replace the T90 hop that is less saturated and just get more? And so we've done a lot of a 1-to-1 sort of replacement, and we employed that in this beer that you're going to have. The name is a joke. It's really, really dead. There's been this sort of running joke that West Coast IPA was, falling out of favor, and never. But it was, that it was a dying trend, and hazy IPA was on the up. And so we've not backed away from West Coast IPA. That is where I cut my teeth as a home brewer, and the beers that inspired me to become a brewer at all were West Coast IPAs, and so I feel like this is a good experience of what we do at North Park. To that point, before I started talking, the bitterness, the balance when we had that hop creep, the bitterness kind of fell a little bit out of check. So I'd say that this beer drinks very flower forward. We're getting a very intense sort of fruit punchy, very rich hop flavor without a ton of bitterness to stand behind it. But I tried it for the first time at Firestone on Thursday, and I thought it turned out really nice. So very, very rich expression of hops.
So we just got it.
Yeah.
I'll tell you if you're right, Kelsey.
All right, let me know.
Yeah. No, you're always right, Kelsey. I love the fact that even though the IPA has evolved, the West Coast IPA is going nowhere. It's just evolving with it. The haze craze is here. It's probably here to stay. I'm not mad at that, but I love that the West Coast clear IPA remains with the firm bitterness, like we talked about, Vinnie, but also with expressions that we learn from hazy beer, right? So I feel like sometimes brewers talk to me, especially if they're not a fan of having to make hazy beer. They've learned from the flowery hop expression, the pillowy hop expression, and how to make it in a clear beer too. So if nothing else, even if you're not a fan of the haze, it has taught you brewers something. It certainly taught you about a consumer palate, right? Vinnie's beer, Happy Hops. Anybody had Happy Hops before? I love this beer because he made it to trick you. He won't tell you that, but he made it. So he's like, oh, I'm gonna make a beer that's clear, like crystal clear, has all the pillowy, flowery hops that you love in a hazy beer. You just won't know it. I'm gonna feed it to you, and
it's
you're gonna
not so hazy IPA.
It's a not so hazy. And there's a guy on my show that works for me, and he hates hazy IPAs. So Vinnie and I tricked him one day on the show. We gave him a blind taste test. He had to taste like a couple hazies and a couple clear beers and then choose his favorite. And the favorite that he chose, and he was so adamant that he hates hazy beer, was Happy Hops. And Vinnie and I were so proud of ourselves. Not that I had anything to do with the beer, but I was proud that we tricked him. Because we were just showing, it's really not about what it looks like all the time, but it is about the expression of hops. And so as the IPA has evolved, you guys have gotten to toy with the expression of hops. Like this beer, Kelsey. Yeah. What's it called?
It's really, really dead. Yeah.
That's what it's called?
That's what it's called.
It's really, really dead.
Yeah.
West Coast IPA is really, really dead.
It's really, really dead.
That's the best name. All right, I'm going to enjoy it. Talk amongst yourself for 1 second. Yeah, so to me, firm bitterness, but also a bunch of pillowy hops. All right, so since we can't cover the entire evolution of the IPA, where are we now, right? So the last panel we talked about was thiolized yeast, which is helping hops express themselves more. But what about just hops themselves? You're using experimental hops that have been grown for the specific purpose of letting us enjoy more of what we love, the flowery, hop-forward part. So talk to us about that, please.
Well, we're kind of in that renaissance of hop breeding that Vinnie talked about, that, breeders are listening to craft brewers specifically, IPA brewers specifically, and working towards flavor profiles that work in these beers. And, prior to that time, we were working with, use CTZ or Columbus as an example. This was a high alpha cultivar that just happened to have really high oil, and when picked in a particular picking window, would express with fruit-forward characteristics. But the breeders were not breeding for that flavor. That just kind of came along with high alpha. And now hops like Mosaic, hops like, many of these, Talus and some of these others, they were bred specifically for their oil profile and how they would express in hops. And probably most importantly, the breeders were talking to craft brewers when selecting and choosing their next step in breeding.
And every hop has like a different. So Strata, right? That's a newish one. It's kind of has like a tannin that comes out of it, right? So something that you would normally get from wood, but it's in hops. Or Citra, of course, has citrus. Simcoe, I don't know, Vinnie, you have to describe Simcoe.
So Simcoe is grapefruit, pine, or dank. It has about a 10-day picking window. And if you pick it early in the picking window, it's grapefruit. If you pick it in the middle of the picking window, it's pine. So it's grapefruit, pine, and then the end is more dank. But if you get it like on day 4 or 5, which Natalie and I like, that Simcoe, it's going to have a little bit of grapefruit, a little bit of pine. Our friend Jeremy from Lagunitas likes the back end of it to be more on the dank
Oh, he
side.
told me that. He's like, if it smells like onion and garlic, Lagunitas will buy it. Yeah. That's their rule. It's like, as soon as nobody else will buy it, send it to Lagunitas.
That was the first hop for me that I learned that a hop can have multiple different qualities and personalities to it.
By when it's picked.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. All right, and then just because everybody's all about hops, we do have to talk a little bit about malt, because that's evolved too. Y'all used to put a bunch of crystal in. Does inaugural ale have crystal?
Yes. So inaugural ale has about 3% Crystal 15 malt in it. There's also about 5% dextrin malt in it, and then it has a 2-3% wheat in it, which a lot of breweries still use wheat in their IPAs. So, and then the rest of it was our 2-row malt that I'd go pick up every Wednesday from Great Western in Los Angeles. But now the smaller breweries are making these modern IPAs, these progressive IPAs with no crystal malt. It's all. It's not just all 2-row malt. In Kelsey's case, as I know, it's Pilsner malt.
Yeah, we lean into the lightest colored Pilsner malt we can find. And in my early homebrewing days, I had a theory that was going to be a way to really build a platform that was going to just let hops rip. Okay. Like we take out the malt and we just build something that is just enough character to where those hops are going to explode. And as we delved into it as a brewery, we opened in 2016, and we did use a little bit of crystal malt, and we were using a 2-row barley when we first started, because those were reminiscent of the homebrews that I was making before opening. And I had some eye-opening experiences just trying some of the beers regionally, like Green Cheek and Highland Park, and seeing what they were doing, and learning that they were taking away this sort of malt character that was just always there as sort of a rule of thumb. And seeing the expression of hops in the absence of the malt was just so eye-opening to me, and wonderful. And so we adapted that to our process and just kept looking for lighter and lighter colored malts that just didn't have a ton of character. And man, like, wow.
And people responded, by the way.
They sure
obviously,
did.
like
Yeah.
they started to know hops by name because of that. Like
Yeah.
we stopped talking about IBUs, and we started naming hops by name as consumers.
What do you use, Enzo, for your malt?
Stealing
your.
No, you're good. That was my next question, Vin. You're good. Here.
In Bavaria, it's a little bit different due to the fact that we have to brew according to the purity law. For instance, we are not allowed to work with flaked oats, which is quite.
You're not allowed to.
We are not allowed to.
And when you think about his cold IPA, he can't use corn or rice like we would use in cold IPA.
Right.
Exactly. So we had to be very creative, what I say, and figure out which malts, especially barley malt, works best for us. So meanwhile, we grow about 80 acres of our own and super old barley variety with 3 different farmers. The unique thing is that it's a very old variety and it's super low in yield. But it's worth it because the protein structure of this barley malt is very special, and this helps us to get more haze and IPAs. We do a similar thing for our pilsners and traditional beers. We grow also a variety which is called Mate. It's another different protein structure. And this year is the very first year that we grow 20 acres of our own wheat or wheat malt. Because we also found a very old variety which is very high in viscosity, so which implements or gives the hazy IPA this mouthfeel. And the only thing what we import from the UK malt houses is malted oats. As said, we are not allowed to work with oat flakes, so we have to import malted oats, and this is very special to us. So it doesn't matter, or the beer style.
So the beer that you serve today, what was the malt bill of that? Was it quite simple?
Exactly. What means simple? So it's we want to have it dry, but not too dry, and to give the beer a certain mouthfeel. One of these older varieties is called Steffi. It's the one with the protein structure. So you get very dry beers, but a rich mouthfeel, if you're aiming for that. And in this case, Steffi was about 30% of the malt bill, and only 70% was Mate. So 2 different varieties of barley. And
no crystal, no like
0.0, 0 corn, 0 rice, 0 crystal, just regular barley, but 2 different varieties.
Okay. See, let's pour the next beer too, which is Mind Haze from Firestone, which I'm so happy that we have here, since we're getting to the end of the evolution of IPA, or the beginning of the evolution, I don't know. But the fact that you grow your own malt, Enzo, it's so extra, so German of you. You're extra.
Yeah, it's all about finding solutions for problems, and if malt outs, or the purity, or what I call it, is a problem, problems get solved, and that's the reason why we grow our own barley. We started in 2019 with only 10 acres, and this year in total with the wheat about 105 acres with 3 different farmers, and they bring they bring it directly to the malt house, and the malt house makes malt out of it.
To your specs.
Exactly, according to our specifications, I say, and then we can call it off within 12 months.
Vinnie, I challenge you to find farmers to grow your malt and then tell them how to malt it. Exactly. So I'm just saying, it's amazing, isn't it?
That reminds me of there's that movie, Natalie's going to remember this, King Corn, where they try to follow like this acre of corn, and then it gets to the whatever processing plant, and they're staring at this giant silo that are like bigger than the tanks at Firestone. Then that's the end of their movie.
I love that the tanks at Firestone are now the example, bro. All right, now you have Mind Haze from Firestone in your glass, I hope, which is one of my favorite hazy beers that's out there. And I know from Matt, who's a great brewer already, but he's always looking to learn more. So he's always asking other brewers, how do you do this? How did you get that? And I think you're a student as much as you are a brewer. And I think with Mind Haze, you've kind of nailed it. So we're not at the end of the evolution of IPA. That's going to go on after this talk. But right now, the evolution of the IPA is hazy. It's hop forward. It's fluffy. It's thiolized yeast. Talk to us about Mind Haze.
Well, it's kind of interesting because when we were thinking about Mind Haze, we kind of put aside almost everything that we were doing or thinking about West Coast IPA, Union Jack, Double Jack, those beers, and we were really focusing on what was happening at the time on the East Coast, but certainly had migrated west. And it really, for me, it was visual, so we wanted to create something that looked visually different, and I think that's a huge part of it. People drink with their eyes. And then there's this texture, this mouthfeel, which we use bitterness so much to bring this exclamation point to the West Coast and that drinkability, the dryness that brings the next sip, and trying to create this equal drinkability in a completely different format. So honestly, I was thinking of it more as a wheat beer and a sessionable, more malt forward and yeast forward and ester forward beer than I was thinking about hops or some of the other things I think about with West Coast. So honestly, I had to like kind of erase West Coast from my mind for a moment and think about a completely different beer and constructing something completely different. And it's interesting that when we talk about West Coast, then it comes full circle to using the hops and some of those flavors and lowering bitterness to create something that might be New World or something like that. So,
well, and I love that you mentioned that because I feel like some of you wonderful brewers who I've respected for so long actually looked at the hazy style and was like, shit, I don't know if I know how to do that. I need more information. It has all the characters that I'm used to, but now I have to do this extra thing to it that I've never done.
At first, and I don't know if everyone agrees with this, but I almost wished it wasn't called IPA, although it probably wouldn't be so popular if it wasn't called IPA, because it's a whole different world of beer, a beautiful world of beer, and I think that's what made it so hard for brewers like myself as old school dudes. Like, no, this isn't IPA. Like, why are you calling this IPA? But anyway.
But even some of the characteristics of it, I'm sorry if I don't mean to call you out, but Matt and I did a podcast for a little while, and when we were inviting guests on to talk about hazy beer, he was like, oh yeah, no, I really want this guest because I want to know how they do that. Because there's really some complexities to it. Shelf stability. I know Sierra Nevada worked for a long time on shelf stability with hazy beer. All these things, it wasn't easy. Us like haters were like, oh, you made homebrew, it's hazy. But you brewers were like, no, it's actually difficult, and I wish I knew how to make it.
Aaron, it's incredibly hard to make a beer stay hazy.
Yeah.
Like, gravity at some point takes effect, but I think I would love. I know Kelsey for sure. I don't know your process, Enzo, but I do. I'm kind of setting Kelsey up, but the fact of how he hops his hazy IPA.
Yeah. I mean, when we're talking about dry hopping a hazy IPA, and that's where most of the hops come into play. We've made hazy IPAs where there's literally zero hops in contact with hot wort, or at least in the kettle. And we'll use liquefied hop extract products on the cold side, where we're going to knock out some of the wort at a higher temperature to get a little bit of that contact at a warm temp, get it into solution, and then complete our knockout and start fermentation with this extracted hop product in solution, which we get this very rich, deep fruit character, having it in there at the start. And then, we dry hop multiple times. Typically, our hazy IPAs are either 2 or 3 dry hops. We'll do an early fermentation dry hop. When we're about 1 Plato away from terminal gravity, we'll add in some concentrated hop pellets, usually cryo or Lupomax type of product, and sets the stage with that biotransformation. And then we'll hit it with a really big dry hop. But I think what really for us in our brew house, we have 2 conical fermenters that have a tangential port in the upper wall, and so we'll do a recirculation post dry hop. And these tanks, when you get the recirc going, you can hear it. Like there's a vortex going on inside that tank, and we're getting everything mixed back up. And we're through the process, we are removing as much yeast as we can every single day until we get those dry hops in there. But what comes out after that recirculation step is just a very static, stable haze. We get this, we're going for very low color. We try and achieve something that is, a very pale gold, and it is milky, in appearance. It is very turbid. And it holds true for quite a while once it's in the package. And the aroma, the flavor, it's deep, rich, saturated, and it's exactly what we're trying to do.
Did y'all notice how you could hear a pin drop right now while Kelsey was talking? Even the brewers up here were like, go ahead, Kelsey, you keep talking. That was some
Kelsey's the E.F. Hutton of beer now.
Seriously, I've never been so mesmerized myself. I always worry sometimes that we're not being entertaining enough, and I'm like, no, shut the fuck up. Kelsey's talking about how to brew a good hazy beer.
That process he was talking about, using these advanced hop products and stuff, that's exactly what we did to that R&D 23 that we have on. Yeah. That was, I stole a page, and Matt and I we've talked about this a lot over the years. We're longtime friends, and that you learn from these youngsters, like Kelsey, these whippersnappers.
I learned from you guys,
and
so.
Evan, and it's really cool that Matt and I have been around for quite a while, can learn these new processes, and we're now taking Kelsey's process, and I'm applying it at our brewery, on our pilot brewery right now, which next week we're going to use on our 20-barrel system, which I then hope to use on our big brewery next year on a quadruple 75-barrel batch.
Yeah, you are.
So it's really cool that Matt and I can learn from these guys.
I don't even know where to go from there. That's, ladies and gentlemen, Kelsey McNair, and our entire panel. Please, thanks to Enzo and Vinnie and Matt. It was really fun to talk about the evolution of the IPA, which is clearly not going anywhere. We're going to keep making IPAs. I love it. Kelsey's going to lead the way for us. If you're in San Diego, go to North Park. I'm going to be there in a couple weeks. If you're in Sonoma, of course, you're going to go to Russian River. Raise your hand if you have not been to Russian River Brewing Company. Oh, you got to get there, bro. There's 1, 2. Oh, there's 3 of you. Okay. You got to go. It's a bit of a mecca for beer lovers. And then, of course, Matt Brynildson, who put on, it's this Matt's Festival. It's Matt Fest. Yeah.
It's Veronica's festival.
It is Veronica's fest. You're right. Yeah, Matt's just he's a pawn. Thank you, everybody, for being with us, and I hope to see you here next year. Be safe, be careful, but enjoy yourselves. We'll see you later.
The Brewing Network.